Hi everyone, could you hear me? If you can hear me, could you just write in the comments that you do? Because I've been having some problems with the microphone and camera. Thank you. Okay, sweet. So hi, my name is Anna Minarik, and I'm a 2018 Schulich leader at Dalhousie University, and I'm going to my third year of neuroscience. I'm talking today about kind of leadership and neuroscience and extracurricular activities, how you can become involved in your university. So Kinga and David sent me some questions to go over. So I'll just start with those, and then once you have questions, just pop them in the chat box and I'll answer them. So the first one was, when did you know you wanted to pursue a career in your current discipline? So when I was kind of growing up, I was really involved with cross-country skiing and biathlon. Biathlon is a combination of cross-country skiing and rifle shooting. That's not very common, and I'm sure not a lot of you have heard of before. So my cross-country ski/biathlon coach, he was actually a neuroscientist, and their family, his wife was also a neuroscientist, and I became really close with their two daughters. And one summer, when he was coaching, I'd always ask him about his research and what he was doing to the mice and all these things. And then one summer, I just got an email from him, or in the spring of grade 11, that they had some extra grant money and that he wanted to know if I would be interested in working in his lab. So I was thrilled and started working there that summer. And neuroscience is a discipline where you don't really hear too much about it in high school. I think the only time we really covered it in the Alberta curriculum was when we were talking about the nervous system in grade 12 and a bit about the brain, but before that, in grade 11 at that point, I had never heard about it as a thing. So being in the lab and then seeing firsthand what research is like, it was pretty awesome. And I kind of jumped right into it because I saw things in the lab that were a little bit, it was not, they were doing animal testing and things like that, which was something that I had never seen before. So it was definitely a little bit to get used to that. But it is a part of neuroscience research that is just part of it, and you have to kind of come to terms with that. So I got used to that in the lab and did kind of spinal cord research. So they studied animals kind of with a spinal cord injury with a model, and were testing it, like how to improve it, with what drugs, etc., in hopes that they could help spinal cord injury patients with their recovery and things like that. So I got to work with humans as well. We did some human testing, so we brought in patients who had spinal cord injuries and then did a variety of tests on them, which was really interesting. So that's how I got into it. That's how I kind of learned that neuroscience was a discipline. And then when I was applying for universities and applying for the Schulich Scholarship, I applied to 6 universities, and in every, I think in UBC I chose biochemistry, so with every university I kind of chose a different discipline within science because I knew that was what I wanted to do. And then when Dalhousie accepted my offered me the scholarship, I had chosen neuroscience here, so it kind of just worked out. And then when I came here, the program was really amazing, and it's very well. I didn't know how well established the neuroscience program here was because in Alberta it wasn't much of a thing. But so that's kind of why I chose kind of neuroscience in that path. And next question I think I'll answer was, what do I find most interesting about my field of study? And one thing that I love about the discipline of neuroscience is every time you learn something, you're learning more about yourself and how we kind of function as a human being, and why we are the way we are. And there's so many disorders that affect the nervous system. For example, my grandma has MS, so kind of learning about disorders that can affect people you know or people that you know of, I found really interesting, in that there's not a lot of things known about certain certain, like medical neuroscience, just kind of, issues. So I'm kind of, I'm going to move on. So I just find the brain fascinating and how it works and how just the amount of knowledge that we don't know about the human brain. So that's why I'm kind of interested into pursuing a research career, which is kind of the next question, what my ideal career path would be like. And that's, so basically when I first came to Halifax, there was a Schulich conference, and I met my friend Kate, who is also Schulich, and she told me that one really good way to get involved in science and in research is to volunteer in a lab. And I would have not have thought about volunteering for a lab in my first year if it wasn't for her telling me that. So I emailed a bunch of professors, and there were some that responded, and one invited me to go into his lab. So I went there, and he was doing stem cell research for ALS, so I thought that was really cool, and just was part of the lab meetings, was talking with the grad students about research and other students in the lab. And some people hate research. It depends on the type of person you are, I guess. Some people find it boring, and I think that might just be because the tasks they give you as an undergrad can sometimes be a bit redundant and repetitive. Like, it's usually data entry or analysis. But it does get more interesting as you get higher up, because you can start to ask the questions and kind of choose the way in which the direction that your research will go, which I think is cool. My ideal goal would be to go somewhere for grad school and then pursue a PhD, and then hopefully have my own lab one day, which isn't the most common of paths, especially for people in my degree. A lot of people want to go into med school, but it's not something that I was that interested ever, and maybe it'll change one day, but for now I'm really interested in pursuing research as a career. So what do I suggest to younger Schulich leaders getting into this field? The first thing I would suggest is putting yourself out there and getting into a lab. And it's kind of hard at first because you will get rejections from profs, or some professors won't respond because they're very busy people. And so you can your feelings can get a bit hurt by that. But if you I don't ever expect to get an email back. I'll just send emails, and then I'll kind of forgot about that I sent them, and then if I get a response, I'm just happy. So just the first thing, don't be upset if you don't get a response right away. Sometimes you can follow up too, but just keep trying, and something will definitely work out for you. Get into a lab and just get that experience, because what you learn in school, you may think it doesn't connect back to the lab and things that you do, and some of it doesn't, I'll be honest, but some of it does. You just don't understand how yet. But when you see things in the lab under a microscope, or you're doing dilutions, or you're doing cell culture work, and the prof is explaining how something works, you're like, oh yeah, that's kind of what we talked about in that lecture or something. So it didn't really happen until my second year, this past year, where what I learned in the classroom really, I kind of saw it translate to some things in the lab, and it'll just get more and more like that as you go into your third, fourth, and upper years, I think, or I hope. So I went to that question. So extracurriculars. I'll talk a bit about extracurriculars. So I'm a bit of a nerd that every time I go to a new city or visit a new city, I first look up neuroscientists in that work there, and I try and set up a meeting with them just to talk about their research. I've only done this really twice, and so the first time was when I was going to a conference in Toronto last year, and I kind of wanted to work at Sick Kids in the summer, this summer, so I wrote, it was very last minute, I wrote professors, I think the week before I left, and usually I would, if you were to do this, I would definitely give yourself more time, at least give yourself 3 weeks, so they can kind of plan if they want to meet you to kind of fit in their schedule, because it does get busy. So I wrote 5 professors and 1 responded. So I was overjoyed when 1 responded. And when I was in Toronto, we met. And one thing I would suggest when doing this is read their research before you go in, so you know what questions to ask, or you can say like, oh, like I saw this in a paper, like could you explain more about this or what you're doing? And I started an hour before meeting this prof, kind of looking at his research and his papers, so I would also suggest giving yourself more time. And I remember trying to read his paper, and I was like, I can't even understand like the first 5 words of his abstract. This is gonna go terrible. But I went and I met him, and he was really, really nice. And he kind of explained his research in a way that I could understand, because I had just finished my that would have been just my first year. Yeah, I would have just finished my first year. So still like not really reading papers that often. And but he explained it in a really nice way. And yeah, so we ended up just talking, and I asked him a couple questions, and I said like, hey, I'm interested in maybe like working at SickKids because they have this summer research internship for the science students, and I was really interested in it. I was telling him about that, and he told me that if I was still interested in kind of the next year, to email him in November, and that he decided to treat our meeting as an interview, which I found really nice, because it wasn't an interview, it was more like him talking about his research and me asking a couple questions. So yeah, I ended up getting a position to work there, and I was supposed to work there this summer, but then COVID happened, so unfortunately the program was cancelled, so I didn't end up doing that this summer. But I can next summer. He said that my offer can extend till next year, so we'll see if that ends up happening. But so that, yeah, I would suggest just putting yourself out there, and if you want to learn more about things, not necessarily like research or neuroscience, but any field you're in, like just anytime you kind of go somewhere new, just kind of be bold and write some people and ask if they'd want to meet and just discuss, because you never know where those things might lead. One thing, for example, is, so my father was from the Czech Republic, so my grandparents are there, that side of the family is there, and I always kind of pictured myself going there one day and kind of doing research and there. And my prof that I work for here had a connection to someone in Czech, so he suggested I go meet her when I was there last summer. And I met her, and kind of through the way we talked and stuff, I realized that the research there wasn't as developed as I wanted it to be, so I kind of realized that I didn't think I would want to end up doing a career there. So it's always so good, because if you meet these people, it's not always about like what they can offer you, but also you learn more stuff about yourself and what's important to you, and if a program is good or if a program is bad. So it's always good. Okay, and I'll keep talking about extracurricular stuff, because that's definitely in my category. So when you're first year, so Dal is doing this program right now. It's called Together at Dal, and they're choosing upper year students to mentor the younger ones. And I think mentorship is such an important part, especially when you're a STRELIC leader, because it's not always about telling people what to do, but it's making the people around you leaders themselves and kind of helping them to help others, if that makes sense. So I don't know where I was going with that, but get involved in your university. It'll make your experience 100 times better, because you'll just meet really close friends, because you're doing things that you both love, and you find what's really like-minded people. So for example, I got involved in some societies in my first year, Neuroscience Society, and even just meeting upper years and them telling you which classes are good to take and which are not good to take, it can be such a lifesaver. Or just them telling you about what opportunities there are, because sometimes it's hard to find information on like a university website, navigating through the pages of what opportunities there are. So it's really good to talk to upper year students about things like that. Yeah, so I just joined several societies, and then last year I started my own society. My father was a mountain climber in Nepal, and he passed away, I think it was 11 years ago now. And so last year I wanted to do something kind of in his memory, but I also wanted to kind of help these children in Nepal. So he was his Sherpa, who was his base camp cook. He has a daughter, and this daughter goes to this center called the Disabled Rehabilitation Center of Nepal. And she kind of goes, children go here often because they're living in extreme poverty or physically disabled, then the center kind of helps them provide education and like healthcare, a place to live, things like that. So this past year, I started with some friends a society, and it's, yeah, even if it's something that's not related to what you want to do, it's a really nice break. And if you're doing things for other people, and you're doing it with people, like your friends and people you love, in university, you can build this really amazing thing because the goal is all the same, and you're kind of working together, because we were fundraising this past year, and we all became quite close, I think. And it's not just about raising money too, it's kind of creating an environment where other university students feel welcome, and if they don't really have many friends, like, we invite them in, and everyone's friends with each other, basically. So we raised we were supposed to raise $3,000, but then one of our big events got canceled. It was the day after the university closed because of COVID. It was a Saturday, and our university closed the Friday, so it was quite unfortunate. But we did make pretty much $2,000 as a first year thing, so I was pretty happy with that. And then we have some kind of virtual fundraiser ideas planned for this next year. So that's kind of my spiel about getting involved in school. And yeah, some of you might be thinking like, oh, okay, so what did you end up doing this past summer if kids didn't work out? And I've been involved in a lab in Halifax, researching about kind of sleep and mental health. So we have a large cohort of families, and some of them are healthy, some of them have a history of mental illness in their family. And we study the youth, and we kind of study the mental health development of youth, and kind of ways that we can prevent the onset of mental illness. So I'm looking specifically at their sleep, because it is shown by some people that it's kind of a precursor sometimes to mental illness, and if we can help sleep issues at a younger age, the extent to which their mental disorder or illness could be way lower, and just studying that. So I'm just doing data analyzing for them and working on a paper. But the number one thing is, if you're in science and doing research or just doing science, everything takes longer than you think. So don't beat yourself up about it, because it just takes always longer than you anticipate. So also, okay, oh my. So Kinga also was asking about study abroad opportunities. I'm a huge fan of throwing yourself in a situation where you don't know anyone and kind of just going from there and being brave and meeting people. That's why I came to Dal, all the way from Alberta. And basically, I planned this past year, so I was supposed to go for a year-long exchange to the Netherlands at this university called Maastricht, and it was kind of a departmental exchange with our psychology and neuro department, and it was unfortunately cancelled because of COVID. But I'm taking 4 courses this summer, and I took a course last summer, so I have kind of 5 extra courses, which kind of is your standard semester. So I'm hoping, instead of an exchange during this year, during my second semester, I'll go to Europe and kind of find a research lab to work in, and kind of see what research like is in Europe. So to answer, Rylan, your question, what graduate schools are you looking into? I'm looking into some in Europe, and by going there hopefully next winter, and seeing more about what it's like, and going and working in university there to kind of get a better idea of that. So right now I'm not sure. I don't think I'd stay at Dal, just because I like going to new places. So I've been looking at a little bit at McGill, and then obviously some ones in England. There's also a really good one in Switzerland. So I'm not sure yet. but I'm slowly starting to look into that. But yeah, thank you for your question. So Kate, I'll answer your question. What advice would you offer to first-year students that are nervous about getting involved in extracurriculars at university? Yeah, as a first year, it's really hard to kind of write a society and say like, hey, can I join? Because I mean, being nervous about that it's completely normal, and it is hard, especially for those who are a little bit more introverted or don't have experience being the ones to reach out, or to have to reach out. But I would say a lot of societies have Facebook pages, so sometimes that can be less daunting than an email. Because with emails, there's a certain structure you usually have to follow, like, dear this person, and with the closing and your name. But with text, it can just be simple as, hey, are you guys looking for anyone in your society? Or, hey, I'm really interested in what your society does, or what you guys are doing, can I join? And I don't think you'll get a no, because I know for a fact that every organization is always looking for new people, and they're very welcoming to students. So my advice is to just do it and to just go for it. It doesn't have to be this huge text or anything. It can be like really simple. But no, usually everyone's super friendly and they'll reach back out to you. So yeah. Another question was, what kind of extracurricular activities are you involved in, and how do they help you as a student? So I already mentioned kind of working and volunteering in a lab. It's really good to talk to upper years, like PhD students, master students, just about kind of what their life is like, and if you like or don't like that. I also was really involved in cross-country skiing when I was growing up, and it's also continued to university. So I coach biathlon and cross-country skiing here. So doing something kind of outside, that's an activity, is really different from school and sitting at a desk and studying. So it's good to kind of do a variety of things and not just work your mind, but also do stuff with your body. And I was also involved with this outdoor society at Dal, and we just planned hikes for students, and usually at like a really low cost, like $5 to go on a bus, or we get drivers that are just students that would just volunteer and drive. So that was really fun, and a great way to meet people. So if your university has some type of outdoors thing, that can always be great, and it allows you to explore the area in which you live in if you're not from there, or even if you're from there. But make sure you like what you're doing. Whatever extracurricular you become involved with, make sure that you really love it and are not doing it just as a CV thing, even though it might be tempting. Because I find that when you're really passionate about something, it kind of drives you to do well and be successful in it. So just make sure that you love what you're doing. And yeah, because if you're miserable, it's not worth it for yourself, and you also tend to not do as well at it. But sometimes you will do things, obviously, that you don't love, like a certain class or something. But so certain instances where you have to kind of work through it. But for extracurricular activities that you can choose to do, I would definitely do something that you're really passionate about. One other thing that we did, or that I've been involved with, is this program called Shine in Halifax, and we basically volunteer tutor these children who are kind of living in like poorer neighborhoods. We're kind of located on the northern end of the city, and it's focused on math and science. So it's once a week for 2 hours. You go into the library, and then you'll be assigned different kids, and you just help them work through their homework and kind of are as an extra support there. Sometimes they don't really need help. They just kind of want someone to kind of look at their homework with you or talk to them, so that's been really great. And then when COVID happened, and we weren't obviously allowed to continue with the program in the library, but we moved to a Zoom platform, and this summer when classes ended, we decided to run kind of a wellness session. So we were kind of making a presentation about like how to eat healthy, things that you can do to maintain your health and wellness, and then we're doing kind of a Jeopardy thing at the end, so it's fun. And we're also planning on running some science experiments for them. So we'll like deliver the little materials, and then we'll kind of run it through Zoom with them. So I'm looking forward to that. And yeah, so does anyone else have any questions? You can throw them in the chat. None so far, so I'll just move into another question that I was given was, do you have any mentors, and how do you obtain and benefit? How did you obtain and benefit from them? So my biggest mentors are probably some of my professors that I've kind of been involved with their research. Just seeing them manage a lab and also teach classes and run a lab and make sure all the students are kind of getting what they need to do. That's been, yeah, so seeing them as role model. I think they've been more like a role model. I guess mentors can be role models and vice versa, but, and then kind of older students for me have been my main mentors, just because like joining a society that's of your discipline or just befriending some upper year students can always be super helpful because they've been through what you're going through. So for example, for me, the second year of university was definitely the hardest. The first year was a pretty good transition, but second year was pretty hard, and we were warned by the older students, but we're like, I don't know, like we'll be fine, like they're just exaggerating, it's not gonna be that hard. And then you have all these like cell bio and cell neuro classes together, and it was a lot, but they kind of help you, they tell you some tips of how they managed it, and yeah, so I would definitely go to older students to be your mentors, but then also it's kind of, in a way, you have to kind of pass the torch as well. Like there's going to be a time when you'll have mentors in university, and then there's a time where you will be the mentor for other students, which I think is really important because it's so important to help younger students and just all students. I know that some universities tend to be a little bit more competitive than others. Dalhousie, I find that, at least in my program, it's not that competitive. All the students are really helpful and interested in helping each other, which has been really, really amazing. And just being able to even rant about a prof or a class or something can bring you guys together. And anyways, that's kind of a side rant. But also grad students could be good mentors. In my cross-country skiing class that I teach, I coach with another PhD student who's actually in neuroscience, funny enough. And so he's been one of my mentors. He's just been able to tell me, and he's also in research, so he's always tells me about research and what to expect, what's important at what stages in your career. And so, for example, applying to grad school, he really emphasized that your GPA is the number one thing, which in some cases can, if you're involved in a lot of extracurriculars and stuff, like they will mainly look at your GPA. And then second, I think they'll look a bit at your extracurricular stuff that's related to your discipline. And then I think they'll look at papers published or your research. So yeah, and then Kate wanted me to elaborate more on my current research. So yeah, the professor that I work for, he basically has this, I forget how many families, but I think like 500 families in Halifax, or 300 to 500, and it's usually families that have a youth sort of between the age of even as young as 2 to 18 plus. I think 25 is the oldest youth right now. And we'll do, every year they'll come in for cognitive tests, and then they will come in for a yearly MRI scan, and they'll do speech samples, and then there's the sleep study that I kind of revamped up because there was a honor student who did it I think 3 years ago, and then the project kind of died, and the professor wanted us to bring the sleep component to the project back, so we did. And yeah, I basically, when families come in, I tell them about this relatively new actigraph study, and we give them a watch-like thing to wear. It's a motion logger actigraph that kind of um, when you sleep, you obviously don't move as much, so it's able to tell when you're sleeping. And then they wear it for 2 weeks, and then I'll get the data back and look at the data and see like different trends. So at the end, right now I'm still working through all the data, because we had to redo our protocol on how we're analyzing it. So I'm going through all of it. So it's about 200 data samples, and we've noticed there was a paper published by the honors student, I think the three years ago, and she found that youth who have a family history of depression or another mental illness, they tend to have more variable sleep. So it's not just usually people think that people who have depression will sleep more. That's not always the case, and we're also looking at the quality of sleep, and we find that their quality of sleep and the consistency of their sleep is quite irregular. So kind of looking at that as a component, and if we can identify what components of sleep are kind of showing to then later on when they develop a mental illness, because this is a longitudinal study, so we're studying families, I think from 5 or 6 years ago till now, and it's going to keep continuing on. So it's a really unique data set. So just to identify what sleep parameters are kind of affect mental illness the most. I'm looking more at the previous study looked more at the difference between weekdays and weekends and how those are variable, and I'm looking more at day-to-day variability. So my kind of, I guess, question, or like what I think, is that youth who have more of a kind of a risk at developing a mental illness due to family history, they will have more variable sleep patterns. So for example, like one day they'll fall asleep at 10, and the next day they'll fall asleep at 2, and then it keeps changing over time where it's not as consistent. So that's kind of the main thing that I'm looking at right now. But yeah, so it's kind of been this summer. Let me know if you have any other questions. Does anyone who's watching get into any new hobbies during quarantine that they know? Reading, yeah. What books have you been reading, Rylan? I'm guilty. I haven't done a lot of reading over the past year just because things with school and now with research kind of got a bit busy. But where do I see myself in 10 years, Kate? Nice, Aiden. That's cool. Do you just snowboard, or do you also ski? I'm a downhill skier, so kind of competitors with you, I guess. Where do I see myself in 10 years? So, yeah, it depends how long it takes to finish the PhD, because sometimes those can last forever. I really hope to be... So right now I'm really interested in sleep research, and I'm sure a lot of you think that sleep is kind of boring, because compared to other kind of mental illnesses that you can study. But the one thing that I like about it is that every single person sleeps, and every single person, we don't know why we sleep, really. There are obviously some theories, but it's such a mystery. So I think going into a field where you have the potential to help a lot of people, for example, I'm sure not all of you, but I'm sure all of you know a couple people who have experienced some type of sleep issues, whether it's sleep apnea or I just can't seem to fall asleep at night, insomnia, things like that. So if we can kind of understand sleep more, we might be able to help people more with that. And it's also not just about sleep, but it's about chronobiology, which is kind of, and also your internal clock. So for example, your glucose levels rise and fall at different periods in the night, and there's all these kind of biological rhythms that we're not really aware about. We're not really aware of. So just there's a lot of components to sleep. So I'm thinking of pursuing sleep research, but I kind of want to get involved more in other sleep labs at Dal this coming year if we're allowed to, and kind of see where that takes me. And yeah, so maybe probably doing a postdoc somewhere, or starting to join a lab, or become a PI at a lab or something like that. But I'm not quite sure yet. But thank you for your question, Kate. What neuroscience are you reading, Rylan? I would recommend the book called oh man, I forget what it's called. There's this one book from this sleep researcher. I think he's from Oxford, and it's called Why We Sleep. I haven't read it yet, but he has a really good TED Talk too. I think his name might be Matt Walker. So I have that on my shelf, but I haven't touched it yet. And then, there's one neuroscience book that I got halfway through. It's called The Brain That Changes Itself. So it's a good book. I just, I didn't finish it because other things came up. But it's hard for me to finish a book. I always start them, and yeah. Yeah, but if you have any more questions, let me know. I'll probably sign off in 5 minutes if you don't have any questions. But also, if you think of ones later on, feel free to message me at any point. Yeah, I was actually in PEI today. I'm in Halifax right now, but I ran into a Shelik leader on the beach, which was really funny. Madeline from PEI, because I met her at our Shelik conference last year, and last year was in New Brunswick. And we were just on the beach, and we were kind of looking at each other. She was with her mom, and we were like, I think I know you from somewhere. And then, yeah, she said something first. So that was a nice surprise. That was today. So you never know where you might run into a Shelik, I guess. But if you guys don't have any more questions, then I guess I'll go. Yeah, I'm reading through some of the questions that they sent. I think I've covered everything I wanted to talk about today, but thank you for having me. And yeah, if you have any questions at all about anything, feel free to message me. But yeah, good night.